Jueves 14 de junio de 2007. Nos acompaña en Periodista Digital Bárbara Smit, una escritora holandesa que ha escrito un libro llamado Hermanos de Sangre, donde relata la historia de dos hermanos y sin embargo rivales, Adolf y Rudolf Dassler, que crearon el imperio de Adidas y Puma. ¿Qué pueden encontrar los lectores en tu libro? What can the readers find in your book?
Well, it's this amazing story of the Dassler brothers and how, two rival brothers in one single little Bavarian village with their rival brands controlled the sports business for several decades. It's Adi and Rudi Dassler, who had a company together in the 20s, who then after the war split up and set up these enemy companies, Adidas and Puma. So it's a wonderful combination of a very dramatic family story and a wonderful business case as well, and all set in this very exciting environment of sports. Their story is the story of sports in the 20th century.
¿Y cómo construyeron ellos sus imperios? How they built their empires?
Well, they were both very shrewd. I mean, they were two very different characters. Adi was a very sort of obsessive craftsman, but he was very lucky in that his wife was Käthe Dassler, was a very shrewd businesswoman. And so one of the distinctive and one of the decisive aspects was that she convinced him to use 3 stripes on the side of the shoes. So you could see them from afar and they became very distinctive. And, when athletes used them at the Olympics, for example, everybody could see them and, could remember that they were used by running or football heroes. On the Puma side, they had the same kind of marketing tricks with the form stripe. And also, of course, making very superior shoes at the time. They were really basically the best shoes around. But what was also decisive in a sense was that they were such close enemies, because that stimulated them to grow their business, to be bigger than the brother on the other side of the river. And so until Nike came along, it was really a duopoly of Adidas and Puma in the sports business. They created it.
Sí, en tu libro cuentas que ellos fueron los pioneros en usar deportistas para promocionar las marcas. In your book tells that they were the pioneers in use athletes for endorsement.
Absolutely, that was a very important part of their business, and it still is. I mean, when you look at Raúl Beckham, of course, that's how they build up their image. But they really started that because there's a very well-known example of Armin Hari, who was a German runner at the Rome Olympics in 1960. He was the first one to really exploit the rivalry between the two brothers by asking money on both sides. So he actually ran the 100 meters in a pair of Pumas and then turned up at the victory stand in a pair of Adidas. And from there on, the gates were opened and athletes started commuting from one side of the river to the other. The stakes rose year by year, and that's how we now are landed in a multi-billion endorsement business.
Sí, por último, ¿cuál es la situación en la que se encuentran en estos momentos Puma y Adidas? What is the situation of Puma and Adidas in this moment?
Well, the situation has changed quite radically in the sense that Nike came along at some point in the 80s. Well, they started in the 70s, but really in the 80s, grew like wildfire and exploited the weaknesses of Adidas and Puma. Adidas and Puma at that point looked at each other so much that they kind of ignored what was going on in the United States, where Nike was emerging very rapidly. And so Nike today is by far the market leader in the world. However, Adidas a couple of years ago has acquired Reebok, so in that sense they come a little bit closer as a company. And Puma was completely reborn as a sports lifestyle brand. They also went nearly bankrupt like Adidas in the late 80s, but were then relaunched by a very sharp businessman called Jochen Seitz as a sports lifestyle brand, with people like Fernando Alonso, for example, being a very good example of kind of stylish sports person who represents that sort of concept very well. And they were very recently acquired by Pinot Printemps Redoute, a luxury French company. So it remains to be seen, how that will influence the development of the brand. But very clearly, they're moving more towards that fashion aspect of the business.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara.
You're welcome.